Silence falls across the prestigious Westmore Chess Club as Amara Johnson, a 12-year-old black girl in tattered clothes, stands before the tournament director. "Check and mate, in 4 moves," she whispers. The crowd gasps. No one believes the homeless child who just defeated the national champion. Before we dive into this incredible story of talent and perseverance, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow Amara's journey from the streets to chess mastery. Are you ready to see how a young girl with nothing but her brilliant mind conquered a world built to exclude her? The December wind cut through Amara Johnson's thin jacket like it wasn't even there, forcing the 12-year-old to pull the frayed edges tighter around her small frame. Boston winters showed no mercy, especially not to those without proper shelter. She glanced at her grandmother Vivian, whose persistent cough had grown worse over the past week. They had been living on the streets for 3 months now, ever since the eviction notice appeared on their apartment door without warning. The landlord had sold the building to developers who doubled the rent overnight, leaving them and 6 other families in their predominantly black neighborhood with nowhere to go. Amara reached into her pocket, feeling the smooth wooden chess pieces her father had carved for her before he was taken away. Calvin Johnson had been arrested 4 years ago for a robbery he didn't commit, his protests of innocence falling on deaf ears in a courtroom where the jury didn't look like him. Before the trial that would sentence him to 15 years, he had taught Amara everything he knew about chess. "The board is the one place where everyone starts equal," he'd told her, placing the handmade king in her small palm. "It doesn't matter what you look like or where you come from. What matters is how you think." Chess had become Amara's escape, her mind palace when reality became too harsh. She would set up her makeshift board on park benches on shelter tables when they were lucky enough to get beds, and sometimes just on the sidewalk playing against herself and imagining her father sitting across from her. Today they had been turned away from the 3rd shelter they'd tried. Full capacity, they were told, though Amara noticed several empty beds as they were escorted out. It was always the same story when they saw Vivian's dark skin and weathered face. The temperature was dropping fast, and Vivian's cough sounded worse than ever. "Grandma, let's find somewhere warm," Amara said, supporting the older woman as they walked slowly down Commonwealth Avenue. Vivian nodded weakly, her breath visible in the cold air. "Just need to rest a minute, baby," she wheezed, leaning against a building. Amara knew the signs of pneumonia. She'd researched it at the public library, after hearing a doctor mention it to another homeless person with similar symptoms. The medicine would cost at least $50 they didn't have. They needed money, and they needed it soon. As they rested, Amara's eyes caught sight of a warm glow from across the street. The Westmore Chess Club stood like a beacon in the wealthy part of town, its ornate entrance framed by perfectly trimmed topiaries despite the winter season. Through the large windows, Amara could see men in expensive suits and women in fine dresses moving pieces across polished marble boards. A banner hung in the window, announcing the annual Winter Championship with a $50,000 prize. For weeks now, Amara had been watching through those windows, studying their games from afar, memorizing openings and strategies she'd never seen in her father's old chess books. She'd even beaten a few of the regular players in her head, spotting moves they missed, while they sipped champagne and laughed loudly at private jokes. "We need to find you some medicine, Grandma," Amara said, firmly decision crystallizing in her mind as she watched Vivian struggle for breath. The older woman had sacrificed everything to care for Amara after her father's imprisonment and her mother's abandonment years earlier. Now it was Amara's turn. She helped Vivian to a bench that was partially sheltered from the wind by an overhang. "Rest here for just a little while. I'm going to get help." Before Vivian could protest, Amara was jogging across the street toward the gleaming doors of the Westmore Chess Club, her determination growing with each step. The club represented everything that had been denied to people like her: warmth, security, opportunity. But it also held the one thing Amara knew she could use to save her grandmother, a game she could win. The heavy oak doors of the Westmore Chess Club felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds as Amara pushed them open, warmth and the scent of expensive cologne immediately washing over her. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and mahogany paneling crystal chandeliers, casting prismatic light across framed photographs of champions past. Not a single black face among them. Conversation halted as heads turned toward the unexpected visitor. Amara stood her ground despite the sudden weight of dozens of judging eyes. Her worn sneakers left small puddles of melted snow on the immaculate floor, her second-hand clothes hanging loosely on her thin frame. The receptionist, a middle-aged white woman, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than 6 months' rent at Amara's old apartment, looked up from her computer with a practiced smile that quickly transformed into a look of disdain. "Excuse me," she said sharply, standing from behind her ornate desk. Her nameplate read, "Elizabeth Holloway, Member Services Director. This is a private establishment. The shelter is 3 blocks east." Amara stepped forward, chin raised despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "I'm not looking for the shelter, ma'am. I'd like to speak with whoever is in charge of the chess tournament." Elizabeth's artificially plumped lips thinned into a hard line. "Young lady solicitation is not permitted here. I'll have to ask you to leave immediately before I call security." The commotion had attracted attention from the main hall where several members had paused their games to witness the disruption. A tall, silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit approached his expression a mixture of annoyance and disdain. "Is there a problem, Elizabeth?" he asked, not even bothering to look directly at Amara. "Mr. Prescott." Elizabeth sighed with relief. "This girl wandered in from the street. I was just explaining that we don't provide handouts here." Richard Prescott, owner of the Westmore Chess Club and director of the tournament, according to the brochure Amara had retrieved from the trash outside, finally turned his cold blue eyes toward her. His nose wrinkled slightly as though he detected an unpleasant odor. "Young lady, this is not a soup kitchen. This is the most prestigious chess club in New England, and we have important matches underway." His voice carried the artificial patience of someone explaining something simple to someone they believed incapable of understanding. "I know what this place is," Amara replied, her voice soft but steady. "I'm here about chess, sir. I was wondering if I could play for food." A burst of laughter erupted from a group of men who had gathered nearby to watch the exchange. "Did you hear that she wants to play for food?" One called out, his voice thick with mockery. "What's next? Checkers for clothes," another added, provoking more laughter. Prescott's thin lips curled into a smirk. "I admire your creativity. But the Westmore has standards to maintain. Our members pay $20,000 annually for the privilege of playing here." He gestured dismissively toward the door. "Now, if you'll excuse us—" Amara stood her ground, thinking of her grandmother shivering on the bench outside. "Please, sir. My grandmother is very sick. She needs medicine. I can play well. My father taught me." This revelation only prompted more amusement from the onlookers. "Maybe she's the next Bobby Fischer," one called out, eliciting more cruel laughter. A younger man with carefully styled hair and an expression of perpetual boredom stepped forward from the crowd. "Oh, come on, Richard. Let's have some entertainment before the semifinals." He looked Amara up and down like she was an unusual specimen in a laboratory. "I'm Jonathan Miller, current club champion," he announced with a self-satisfied smile. "I'm preparing for the Nationals next month. Perhaps a quick lesson for our aspiring player might be amusing." Amara recognized him from newspaper clippings in the library. He'd won several regional tournaments and was favored to place in the upcoming national championship. Prescott seemed to consider the suggestion, a calculating look crossing his features. "Very well," he finally said, checking his Rolex. "We have 30 minutes before the next round of the tournament. It might provide some light diversion." He turned to the gathering crowd of members. "What do you say? Shall we see what our visitor can do?" Calls of agreement and laughter filled the space as Amara was ushered toward the main hall. Prescott's hand hovering near but not touching her shoulder, as though worried about contamination. As they walked, she heard whispered comments. "Where do they find these people? This is why we need better security. Standards just aren't what they used to be." The crowd moved into the main playing area, where dozens of expensive chess sets rested on tables arranged throughout the room. Members began placing casual bets on how quickly Miller would win. 2 minutes tops. I say 5 moves before she gives up. $20 says she doesn't even know how the pieces move. In the corner of the room, a young black man in a server's uniform caught Amara's eye. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing. He gave her a subtle nod of encouragement before disappearing through a service door. Prescott directed Amara to a table in the center of the room, ensuring maximum visibility for her impending humiliation. Miller took his seat across from her, casually adjusting his cufflinks as he smirked at his friends. "White or black?" he asked condescendingly. Before Amara could answer, Prescott interjected. "Give her white. At least she'll have the advantage of the first move." His tone made it clear he believed no advantage would be enough. Amara sat down quietly, her eyes focused on the beautifully carved marble pieces before her. The board was unlike anything she'd ever played on each square, perfectly measured, each piece a work of art compared to her father's simple wooden carvings. But the pattern was the same: 64 squares, 16 pieces each. And in that moment, as the wealthy crowd gathered to mock her, Amara found comfort in the familiar logic of the game before her, the one place where, as her father had taught her, everyone truly started equal. The hush that fell over the Westmore Chess Club held more condescension than respect, as Amara made her first move, advancing her king's pawn 2 spaces forward. Miller responded with a lazy push of his own pawn, not even bothering to consider his strategy, his attention more focused on the amused faces of his friends than on the board between them. "So, where did you learn to play?" he asked, with exaggerated politeness, the kind adults reserve for children they believe are engaging in adorable pretend. The streets must be full of grandmasters these days. Laughter rippled through the crowd of spectators as Amara moved her knight out her small fingers, confident on the expensive marble piece. She didn't respond to his taunt, focusing instead on the emerging position. 3 moves in. Miller's patronizing smile faltered slightly as he noticed Amara wasn't playing random moves, but was setting up a variation of the Ruy Lopez, opening a sophisticated strategy that beginners rarely employed. His eyes flicked to the board with newfound attention, and he adjusted his next move to counter her developing position. "Interesting," he muttered, more to himself than to Amara. The crowd's amusement began to shift as the game progressed, murmurs of surprise, replacing outright mockery as Amara's pieces moved in coordinated patterns across the board. Miller, now fully engaged, leaned forward with a furrowed brow. By move 12, he had abandoned all pretense of casual play, his earlier bravado replaced by intense concentration. In Amara's mind, she was no longer in the opulent Westmore Club, but back in the tiny apartment with her father, his patient voice guiding her through the complexities of the game. "Chess isn't about taking pieces, Amara," he'd explained, moving his knight to an apparently vulnerable position. "It's about controlling space. Sometimes you sacrifice something small to gain something greater." She'd watched in fascination as his seemingly weak move had transformed 3 turns later into a powerful attacking position. Now facing a nationally ranked player, Amara employed the same principle, sacrificing a pawn in what appeared to be a blunder. Miller pounced on the opportunity, taking her pawn with a poorly concealed smile of relief. "Ah, there we go," he said, relaxing slightly. "You had me worried for a moment." But Amara's next move, sliding her bishop diagonally across the board to threaten both his queen and create a discovered attack on his rook, wiped the smile from his face. "What the hell?" he muttered low enough that only Amara could hear. The gathering crowd grew larger as word spread through the club that the homeless girl was giving Miller a genuine challenge. Richard Prescott pushed his way to the front, his expression darkening as he observed the board state. "Surely you're not struggling against a child, Jonathan?" he asked loudly enough for everyone to hear, adding pressure to the already flustered champion. Miller didn't respond, his fingers hovering over his pieces as he calculated possible moves, none of which could save both his threatened queen and rook. He finally moved his queen to safety, sacrificing the rook with visible frustration. Amara's face remained impassive as she claimed the piece, but inside a small flame of hope began to grow. Maybe, just maybe, she could win this. For her grandmother, for her father, for herself. The young black waiter Amara had noticed earlier appeared at the edge of the crowd carrying a tray of water glasses. As he circulated among the spectators, he managed to place one discreetly near Amara, giving her a quick wink of support before continuing his rounds. She took a grateful sip, realizing how dry her mouth had become in the tense atmosphere. 20 moves, in what had begun as a spectacle intended to humiliate, had transformed into a legitimate chess match that had drawn the attention of every member present. The whispers had changed tone entirely. Where did she learn to play like that? Is Miller losing to her? This can't be happening. Miller's face had grown flushed, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead as he struggled to regain control of the board. Amara had maneuvered her pieces into a complex attacking formation that threatened his king from multiple angles. His defensive options were rapidly diminishing. "This is taking too long," Prescott announced, suddenly checking his watch with exaggerated impatience. "We have a tournament to continue." "I'm not done yet," Miller snapped, not taking his eyes off the board. The position is complicated." A murmur ran through the crowd at this admission from the club champion. Amara saw her opportunity and advanced her queen to g4, creating an unavoidable threat. "Check," she said quietly, the first word she'd spoken since the game began. Miller stared at the board in disbelief, moving his king to the only available square. Amara immediately shifted her knight, revealing a second check. "Check again," she said, her voice slightly stronger. The club fell completely silent as Miller moved his king once more, his hand visibly trembling now. Amara's final move, sliding her bishop across the board to complete the trap, was met with a collective gasp from the onlookers. "Checkmate," she whispered, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Miller stared at the board in shocked silence, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, anger, and finally, humiliation. He knocked his king over with a sharp flick, the marble piece rolling across the polished wooden table. "Impossible," he muttered, standing abruptly. "Absolutely impossible." Let me pause here and ask you all a question. Have you ever been underestimated based on your appearance or background? Comment number 1. If you've experienced someone judging your abilities before giving you a fair chance, like what happened to Amara. And if you're enjoying this journey of talent triumphing over prejudice, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Now, what do you think will happen next? Will the chess club members accept Amara's extraordinary talent, or will they find another way to dismiss her remarkable victory? Let's continue and find out. The stunned silence that had fallen over the Westmore Chess Club lasted only moments before erupting into a chaos of voices. Miller stood up so abruptly that his chair teetered backward, nearly falling. "This is absurd," he sputtered, his face flushed with humiliation. "She must have memorized a particular game sequence. This is some kind of trick." His accusation broke the dam, allowing others to join in rather than acknowledge what they'd just witnessed. Someone must have coached her to follow a specific pattern, called out an elderly man in a bow tie. Probably one of those computer programs suggested another member, as though Amara, in her tattered clothes and worn shoes, had access to chess software when she didn't even have a roof over her head. Richard Prescott, whose expression had darkened with each of Amara's masterful moves, seized upon these accusations. "Young lady," he said, his voice icy with authority, "we don't appreciate parlor tricks in this establishment." Amara looked up at him, confusion etched across her face. "It wasn't a trick, sir. I just played chess." Her simple statement only seemed to infuriate Prescott further. "I think we've had quite enough entertainment for one evening," he announced to the room at large. "The tournament will resume in 15 minutes. As for you," he turned back to Amara, not bothering to lower his voice, "we agreed to a game, not to charity. I must ask you to leave immediately." The injustice of it struck Amara like a physical blow. She had played fairly, had won against their champion, and still they refused to see her skill as legitimate. "But I won," she said, her voice small but determined. "You said I could play for food." A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the crowd. Some members shifted awkwardly, avoiding eye contact, while others nodded in agreement with Prescott. "She's right, Richard," a voice called from the back. "A deal's a deal." Miller, still standing beside the table, scoffed loudly. "Please, I wasn't playing seriously. It was a fluke." His wounded pride was palpable as he straightened his tie with trembling fingers. Or worse. "For all we know, she's been watching through the windows and studying our games. That's practically cheating." This last accusation hit uncomfortably close to the truth, causing Amara to flush slightly. She had indeed watched games through the window, but only because she'd had no other way to learn advanced strategies. Before she could defend herself, a new voice cut through the tension. "That's not fair, and you know it, Mr. Miller." The young black waiter who had brought Amara water stepped forward, removing his serving jacket as though shedding the role of invisible servant. "I saw that game. She outplayed you fair and square." The room fell silent again, this new development. A staff member defending the homeless girl, adding yet another shocking twist to the evening. Marcus Prescott said, his voice dangerously quiet, "You're here to serve drinks, not opinions. Get back to work or don't bother coming in tomorrow." Marcus stood his ground, though Amara could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing his livelihood against what he'd just witnessed. "Sir, with all due respect, I've worked here for 3 years. I've watched hundreds of matches. What this girl just did was remarkable, and you know it." Another voice joined the fray, this one belonging to a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the serious demeanor of someone used to being obeyed. "Hold on a minute." He stepped forward from the crowd, studying Amara with intense scrutiny. "Your last name is Johnson, isn't it, Calvin Johnson's daughter?" Amara's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her father's name. "Yes, sir." "How did you know that?" The man extended his hand formally. "Detective James Wilson, Boston PD. I worked on your father's case a few years back." A murmur rippled through the gathered members at this revelation. Prescott's eyes narrowed with newfound interest. "Her father is a criminal?" he asked, seizing on this information like a lifeline. Detective Wilson shook his head slowly. "Her father was convicted of armed robbery, yes, but I always had my doubts about that case. The evidence was circumstantial at best." He turned back to Amara. "He taught you chess, didn't he?" Amara nodded, fighting back the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Every day until they took him away." Her voice didn't break, but it was a near thing. "He said I had a gift for it." Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Calvin was a regional champion back in the day before." He trailed off, leaving the circumstances of her father's derailed life unspoken. This new information created a palpable shift in the room. Some members looked at Amara with newfound curiosity, the daughter of a chess player making more sense than a random prodigy from the streets. Others, however, seemed to harden in their rejection the connection to an imprisoned man, only confirming their prejudices. Amara, sensing a potential opening, spoke up again. "Please, sir," she addressed Prescott directly. "My grandmother is sick with pneumonia. She needs medicine. I can play in your tournament. If I win, I can use the prize money to help her." Her bold request drew scoffs from several members, but not everyone. An elderly woman with silver hair and piercing gray eyes stepped forward from the crowd. "Richard, surely we can make some accommodation for extraordinary talent. Isn't that what this club was founded for? The advancement of chess excellence." Prescott's jaw tightened visibly. "Dr. Reed, while I appreciate your sentiment, this is hardly the venue for charity cases. We have standards to maintain." Dr. Eleanor Reed, her posture regal, despite her advanced age, raised a single eyebrow. "Standards. I thought our standard was chess excellence. This young lady has demonstrated that in spades." She gestured toward the board where Amara's victory still stood. "Miller's toppled king, a testament to her skill. I would be willing to sponsor her myself for the tournament entry." Her offer sent another ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Prescott found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position, caught between his desire to remove Amara from the premises and the unexpected support she was receiving from respected members. "This is highly irregular," he protested, but his absolute authority was beginning to crack. Dr. Reed wasn't finished. "If there's any question about her abilities, I would be happy to play a match with her myself." She smiled at Amara, though the competitive glint in her eye made it clear this would be no easy game. "I was women's state champion for 3 consecutive years in my younger days." If the girl can beat me as well, I think that would settle any doubts about her skill, wouldn't you agree? The challenge hung in the air, impossible for Prescott to dismiss, without appearing unreasonable. The crowd, sensing more unexpected entertainment, voiced their approval of this suggestion. Prescott looked from Reed to Amara, his options dwindling. Very well, he finally conceded, though his tone suggested this was far from over. One more match. But when Dr. Azrio.canalemes, the www.com. Reed wins. I expect this matter to be settled once and for all. His emphasis on when rather than if made his expectations clear. Amara looked at the elderly woman who had stepped forward as her unlikely champion, wondering what new challenges awaited her on the chessboard. What she didn't yet realize was that the real battle was only beginning and that the game of chess would be the least of her worries in the power dynamics of the Westmore Club. The crowd rearranged itself around a fresh table as Dr. Eleanor Reed took her seat across from Amara, her silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandeliers. Unlike Miller's dismissive attitude at the start of their match, Dr. Reed regarded Amara with the focused attention of a scientist examining a fascinating specimen. Black or white, young lady? Your choice this time. She offered, her voice carrying the refined accent of expensive education. Before Amara could answer, Prescott interjected from the sidelines. Dr. Reed will take white, and to ensure this match moves along quickly, we'll use tournament time controls. He produced an elegant chess clock from a nearby cabinet. 30 minutes per player should be more than sufficient. His emphasis on the time constraint wasn't lost on Amara. It was yet another obstacle placed in her path. But Dr. Reed surprised them both. Actually, Richard, I'll take black. The young lady has earned the small advantage of the first move. She smiled at Amara with genuine respect, and I'd prefer 45 minutes each. I'm not as quick with my moves as I once was. Prescott's mouth tightened, but he couldn't very well refuse the request of one of the club's most distinguished members. As the pieces were arranged and the clock set, more members gathered to watch this unexpected second act of the evening's drama. The division among them was becoming increasingly apparent, some visibly rooting for the establishment to put the upstart in her place, others curious to see if Amara's victory over Miller had been a fluke, and a small but growing faction, quietly hoping to witness another upset. Amara took a deep breath as she contemplated her first move. Dr. Reed was clearly a different caliber of opponent than Miller. Her eyes held none of his arrogance, but rather the sharp calculation of someone who had spent decades studying the game. Deciding against her usual opening, Amara moved her queen's pawn forward 2 spaces, electing for a more closed, strategic game. Dr. Reed nodded slightly in approval before responding with her own pawn. As the game progressed, Amara quickly realized that Dr. Reed played a completely different style than Miller. Where he had been flashy and aggressive, Dr. Reed was patient and methodical, setting subtle traps and thinking several moves ahead. Her classical European approach to the game was like reading a different dialect of a familiar language, recognizable but requiring careful translation. The surrounding crowd watched in fascinated silence as the game developed, the tension building with each move. Unlike the previous match, there were no easy jokes or dismissive comments. Even those hoping for Amara's defeat couldn't deny the high-level chess being played before them. As Amara contemplated a critical middle-game move, her mind flashed back to the chess games she'd played with homeless veterans in Boston Common. Mr. Jackson, a Vietnam veteran who lived under a tarp near the public garden, had taught her the importance of adaptability. Different opponents need different strategies, he'd explained, while demolishing her queenside attack. You gotta learn to speak their chess language, then find the accent they ain't prepared for. Taking this wisdom to heart, Amara adjusted her approach, shifting from the attacking style that had worked against Miller to a more positional game that could counter Dr. Reed's methodical play. 20 moves and Richard Prescott began pacing behind Amara's chair, his expensive shoes clicking loudly on the marble floor. Remarkable concentration for someone so young, he commented, his voice pitched to carry. Though I imagine concentration comes easily when you have nothing else to worry about but your next meal. The psychological tactic was transparent but effective. Amara's next move came a bit too quickly, slightly weakening her position. Dr. Reed frowned disapprovingly at Prescott, but remained focused on the game. Marcus, who had remained in the room despite Prescott's earlier threat to his employment, circulated with a fresh tray of waters. As he passed Amara, he discreetly placed a napkin-wrapped package beside her. A quick glance revealed it contained a sandwich and small pastry. Amara's stomach growled at the sight, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since morning. Rather than consuming it, however, she carefully slipped the food into her jacket pocket. Her grandmother needed it more than she did. The middle game stretched on with both players trading minor pieces but maintaining the tension of their respective positions. Dr. Reed played with the precision of someone who had studied chess theory for decades, while Amara relied on her natural intuition and pattern recognition. The styles made for a fascinating contrast that wasn't lost on the more knowledgeable spectators. Remarkable, whispered one elderly member to another. The girl plays like Tal, all intuition and tactical brilliance, while Eleanor's channeling Petrosian, his companion agreed. Positional perfection. As the endgame approached, Amara found herself with a slight material advantage but facing a complex position. Dr. Reed had maneuvered her remaining pieces with surgical precision, creating a defensive fortress that would be difficult to breach. With 15 minutes left on her clock, Amara paused for her longest think yet, considering all possible approaches. The room had grown so quiet that the ticking of the chess clock seemed thunderous. It was during this critical moment that Amara recalled a particularly obscure endgame strategy she'd read about in one of the chess books at the public library, a counterintuitive sequence that sacrificed immediate advantage for the Revan.com, long-term positional dominance. It was risky, especially against an opponent of Dr. Reed's caliber, but it might be unexpected enough to work. Taking a deep breath, Amara committed to the plan, moving her knight to an apparently vulnerable position. Dr. Reed's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication that the move had surprised her. The elderly woman studied the board intently, perhaps sensing the trap, but unable to fully visualize its dimensions. After careful consideration, she captured the knight with her bishop. 3 moves later, the brilliance of Amara's strategy began to unfold. Her remaining pieces suddenly coordinated in a powerful attacking formation, threatening Dr. Reed's king from multiple angles simultaneously. The older woman's eyes widened in recognition, just as the trap closed. "I believe that's checkmate in 3, Amara said softly, showing the forced sequence that would end the game. Dr. Reed studied the position for a long moment before a smile slowly spread across her face. Instead of responding with anger or denial, she extended her hand across the board. "Beautifully played, my dear. Absolutely beautiful." She turned to the stunned audience. For those who don't see it, she's found the Lasker trap variation in the Queen's Gambit declined, a sequence so rarely seen in practical play that most grandmasters know it only as a theoretical possibility. The significance of this assessment was not lost on the chess enthusiasts present. Murmurs of amazement spread through the crowd as Dr. Reed stood and formally bowed to her young opponent. "In 50 years of playing chess, I've never seen it executed in person. Remarkable." Richard Prescott's face had gone from red to nearly purple, his carefully constructed world of exclusivity and privilege crumbling before his eyes as a homeless black girl defeated not 1 but 2 of his club's champions. But even he couldn't deny what had happened on the board. As the reality of her second victory sank in, Amara felt a sudden surge of hope. Surely now they would have to take her seriously. Surely now they would honor their agreement and help her grandmother. What she didn't yet realize was that, in some battles, the rules could be changed mid-game, and that those with power rarely surrendered it willingly, even in the face of undeniable merit. The news of Amara Johnson's second victory spread through the Westmore Chess Club like wildfire, creating ripples of disbelief, admiration, and in some corners, outright resentment. Richard Prescott had retreated to his office immediately following the match, his expression thunderous as he slammed the door behind him. Dr. Eleanor Reed, still energized by the exceptional game she'd just played, had taken Amara under her wing, introducing her to the few members who seemed genuinely impressed by her talent. "This child has extraordinary potential," Dr. Reed explained to a small group gathered in the club's lounge area. the kind of natural talent we see perhaps once in a generation. Amara stood awkwardly beside her, hyper-aware of her worn clothes, and the food still hidden in her pocket for her grandmother. The conversation around her flowed with terms like sponsorship and development program, words that seemed to open doors to possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. But the momentary elation was short-lived. Richard Prescott emerged from his office with a fresh composure that Amara found more unsettling than his previous anger. He approached their small gathering with a folder in hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Reed, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, I'm afraid I must remind everyone of the club's bylaws." He opened the folder and removed a document with the club's ornate letterhead. Section 3, Paragraph 4, clearly states that tournament participation is restricted to members in good standing or invited guests with appropriate credentials. He looked directly at Amara, his smile thinning. "As neither applies in this case, I'm afraid formal participation in our tournament is simply not possible." Dr. Reed's expression hardened. "Richard, this is absurd. We've just witnessed extraordinary chess from this young lady. Surely we can make an exception." Prescott's voice remained pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "The rules exist for a reason, Eleanor. If we start making exceptions, where would it end? Next, we'd have people walking in off the street, claiming they deserve membership without paying dues." The calculated cruelty of his words wasn't lost on Amara. He was deliberately framing her as an interloper, trying to get something for nothing rather than acknowledging the legitimate talent she'd demonstrated. "I won the games," Amara said quietly, finding her voice despite the intimidating surroundings. "You said I could play for food if I won. I won twice." Prescott looked down at her with barely concealed disdain. "Yes, well, that was an informal arrangement for a friendly game. Tournament entry is an entirely different matter. The buy-in alone is $5,000. He named an amount that might as well have been $5 million to Amara. "But I'm sure we can find something suitable for your situation." Perhaps Marcus could wrap up some leftovers from the kitchen. The deliberate humiliation stung, but Amara thought of her grandmother shivering on the bench outside and swallowed her pride. "Thank you, sir. Anything would help." Her quiet dignity in the face of his condescension seemed to irritate Prescott further. Before he could respond, Marcus appeared at the edge of their group, his expression serious. "Mr. Prescott, there's a call for you at the front desk. They say it's urgent." With a last warning glance at Amara, Prescott excused himself. As soon as he was out of earshot, Marcus whispered urgently to Dr. Reed. "I overheard him on the phone earlier. He's looking into her background. Called someone at the courthouse about her father's case." Dr. Reed's expression darkened. "That vindictive old snake. He's looking for ammunition." She turned to Amara with concern. "My dear, is there anything about your father that could be used against you? Anything at all?" Amara hesitated, the weight of her family's troubles suddenly heavy on her shoulders. "He was convicted of armed robbery 4 years ago. He's at Norfolk State. But he didn't do it," she added quickly. "He always said they had the wrong man, that he was at a chess tournament when it happened." This new information traveled quickly among the small group of Amara's supporters, creating worried glances. One member, a corporate lawyer named Thomas Brennan, shook his head grimly. "Prescott has connections with the DA's office. If there's anything in that case file he can use, he'll find it." As if summoned by these words, Prescott returned to the gathering, his earlier frustration now replaced with something more dangerous, satisfaction. He made a show of checking his watch. "Well, it's getting quite late. The club will be closing in 30 minutes, and our young visitor should probably be on her way." His emphasis on visitor made it clear that's all Amara would ever be in his eyes. Dr. Reed stepped forward. "Richard, I'm formally sponsoring this girl's entry into the tournament. I'll cover the fee myself." A collective gasp went up from those gathered. Prescott's smile didn't waver, though his eyes hardened. "That's very generous, Eleanor." "Unfortunately, there's also the matter of membership. Tournament participants must be members or guests of members. And membership applications require a thorough background check, character references, and board approval. The process typically takes several months." His message was clear. He would use every bureaucratic obstacle at his disposal to prevent Amara from competing. The unfairness of it all caused something to snap in Amara. "This isn't about rules," she said, her voice stronger than before. "This is about not wanting someone like me in your club." The blunt statement caused several members to look away uncomfortably, the truth of it hanging in the air. Prescott's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the anger beneath. "Young lady, this club has maintained its prestigious reputation through careful adherence to standards and procedures. Your insinuation is both incorrect and unwelcome." Before Amara could respond, Marcus stepped forward again. "Dr. Reed, there's a message for you as well. Something about an urgent situation at the hospital." Dr. Reed frowned, confused. "The hospital. But I've been retired for years." Marcus gave her a meaningful look that Amara couldn't interpret. "They specifically asked for you. Said it was about a pneumonia case." Understanding dawned on Dr. Reed's face. "Yes, of course. I should take that call immediately." She squeezed Amara's shoulder gently. "Don't go anywhere, my dear. We'll sort this out. As Dr. Tupazan Osef, by day." Reed followed Marcus toward the reception desk. Prescott seized the opportunity to isolate Amara from her newfound supporters. "Now then, I believe it's time we concluded our business here. The kitchen staff has prepared a small package for you as promised." He gestured toward the front desk, where Elizabeth Holloway held a paper bag with visible reluctance, as though it might contaminate her. Amara thought of her grandmother waiting in the cold and knew she couldn't leave empty-handed regardless of the humiliation. As she moved to collect the bag, Prescott added in a low voice meant only for her, "I've made some inquiries about your father, Calvin Johnson. Interesting case. Did you know the evidence included testimony from a pawn shop owner who claimed he tried to sell chess pieces stolen from the victim's home? Quite the coincidence." The implication hit Amara like a physical blow, the suggestion that her father's chess connection somehow proved his guilt rather than supporting his innocence. "That's not what happened," she whispered, but Prescott had already turned away, dismissing her as effectively as he'd dismissed her chess victories. Outside, the temperature had dropped further, and light snow had begun to fall. With the paper bag of food clutched to her chest, Amara hurried back to where she'd left her grandmother, her thoughts churning with the events of the evening. But the bench where Vivian had been waiting was empty. Panic immediately seized Amara as she looked frantically in every direction. "Grandma!" she called, her voice rising with fear. "Grandma, where are you?" A gentle hand on her shoulder made her jump. Marcus stood behind her, now wearing a heavy coat over his server's uniform. "She's okay," he said, quickly seeing Amara's terror. Dr. Reed had her taken to the hospital. Her cough was getting worse, and a passerby called an ambulance. Relief and fresh worry battled in Amara's chest. "The hospital, but we can't afford." Marcus shook his head. "Dr. Reed is handling it. She used to be chief of medicine at Boston General before she retired. Your grandmother is in good hands." Tears threatened at this unexpected kindness, but Amara blinked them back. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." Marcus smiled sadly. "Let's just say I recognize what it's like to have the deck stacked against you. Besides," he added with a small grin, "the look on Prescott's face when you checkmated Miller was worth more than a month's salary." As they began walking toward the hospital, Marcus explained that Dr. Reed wasn't the only one impressed by Amara's chess prowess. There's a group of members who disagree with Prescott's exclusive vision for the club. They've been trying to push for more diversity, more community outreach. Your performance tonight gave them ammunition. His expression turned serious. But Prescott won't give up easily. He's already making calls trying to dig up dirt on your father to discredit you. A cold weight settled in Amara's stomach that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What can he do? My father's already in prison." "It's not about your father," Marcus explained gently. "It's about controlling the narrative. If he can paint your family as criminals, he can justify excluding you without admitting the real reason. The real reason." The words hung unspoken between them, but Amara understood. It wasn't just that she was homeless or poor, it was the color of her skin that Prescott found so objectionable in his exclusive club. The realization wasn't new. She'd faced similar prejudice her entire life, but the blatant injustice of it still stung. As they approached the hospital, Amara noticed a familiar face waiting near the entrance. Detective Wilson, the police officer who had recognized her at the club. His presence immediately put her on guard. "What's he doing here?" she whispered to Marcus. Before he could answer, the detective approached them, his expression grave but not unkind. "Amara," he said with a nod. "I heard about your grandmother. I'm sorry." His genuine concern was unexpected. "I've also been looking into your father's case file," he continued, lowering his voice. "There are some inconsistencies that never sat right with me. Witness statements that didn't quite align evidence that seemed convenient. Hope dangerous and fragile," fluttered in Amara's chest. "What are you saying?" Wilson glanced around as though checking who might be listening. "I'm saying that after what I saw tonight, your talent, your determination, I'm going to reopen some lines of inquiry. No promises," he added quickly, seeing the hope blooming on Amara's face. "But I'll look into it." This unexpected development left Amara reeling. In the space of a few hours, her simple plan to win food for her grandmother had evolved into something far more complex. A chess tournament, with life-changing stakes, potential allies in unexpected places, and now the faint possibility that her father's case might be re-examined. But as she entered the hospital to find her grandmother, one question burned brighter than all others. Would these new possibilities be enough to overcome the powerful opposition arrayed against her, and would her chess skills alone be enough to change the trajectory of her life? Can you imagine being in Amara's position right now? Comment number 1. If you believe Prescott's actions are driven by racism rather than club rules. Comment number 2. If you think Detective Wilson will actually help with her father's case. The stakes are getting higher with each move in this game, both on and off the chessboard. If you're rooting for Amara to overcome these obstacles, hit that like button and subscribe to see how her story unfolds. What do you think Prescott will do next to try to stop Amara from competing in the tournament? Let's continue and see how our young chess prodigy handles these mounting challenges. The fluorescent lights of Boston General Hospital cast harsh shadows across Vivian Johnson's face as she slept, oxygen flowing through a nasal cannula. Amara sat beside her grandmother's bed, her chess pieces arranged on the small rolling tray table, moving them absently as she considered her next steps. The last 48 hours had been a whirlwind of unexpected developments. Dr. Dejan 70 point. Eleanor Reed had not only arranged for Vivian's hospital admission, but had used her considerable influence to ensure she received top-quality care. The diagnosis was severe pneumonia, requiring intravenous antibiotics and close monitoring. "She'll recover," the attending physician had assured Amara, "but she'll need rest and proper care for several weeks afterward." The unspoken question, where a homeless woman and her granddaughter would find such accommodations, hung in the air, but Dr. Reed had simply nodded, as though this were already solved. "I have a guest apartment that's sitting empty," she told Amara later. "It's nothing fancy, but it has heat and running water. You'll stay there until we sort out something permanent." The elderly chess master's matter-of-fact generosity had left Amara speechless. While Vivian's immediate medical crisis was being addressed, another battle was brewing across town. True to her word, Dr. Reed had formally submitted Amara's name as her sponsored entrant to the Westmore Chess Club's Winter Championship. As expected, Richard Prescott had immediately raised a host of objections, citing bylaws and traditions that suddenly seemed flexible enough to exclude a black girl from the streets, but rigid enough to resist any attempts at inclusion. The standoff had created a schism within the club. A growing faction led by Dr. Reed and several other long-standing members argued passionately for making an exception based on Amara's extraordinary talent. The opposition, with Prescott at the helm, insisted that rules were rules and that making exceptions would undermine the club's prestigious standing. What had begun as a simple request to play for food had evolved into a symbolic battle over who deserved a seat at the table, literally and figuratively. A soft knock at the hospital room door pulled Amara from her thoughts. Marcus entered carrying a paper bag that emitted the enticing aroma of hot food. "Brought you some dinner," he said, placing the bag on a nearby chair. "Can't have our chess champion playing on an empty stomach. Amara smiled gratefully. In the short time since their meeting, Marcus had become a steadfast ally, bringing her updates from the chess club and ensuring she had meals during her hospital vigil. "Any news?" she asked automatically, referring to the ongoing debate about her tournament participation. Marcus's expression brightened. "Actually, yes. The board voted this morning. It was close, 5-4, but you're in." The words took a moment to register. "I'm in. I can play in the tournament." Marcus nodded, his smile widening. Dr. Reed was apparently very persuasive. Plus, some of the younger members threatened to resign if they blocked you. Bad publicity, you know. Amara's heart soared with unexpected hope. A chance, a real chance, at the $50,000 prize that could change everything for her and her grandmother. But Marcus continued, his expression turning serious. "Prescott didn't take it well. He's implementing a bunch of new tournament conditions that just happened to be announced after your entry was approved. Special table assignments, stricter time controls. Basically anything he can do to make it harder without explicitly barring you." Rather than discouraging her, this news only strengthened Amara's resolve. He can try whatever he wants. The chess pieces don't care who's moving them. Her quiet confidence drew a laugh from Marcus. "That's the spirit. Oh, and Detective Wilson called the club looking for you. Said he has some information about your father but wouldn't tell me what it was." He left his number. He handed Amara a slip of paper with the detective's contact information. Before she could respond, Dr. Reed appeared in the doorway, dressed in an elegant pantsuit despite the early hour. "Ah, good, you're both here. We have much to discuss and very little time. The tournament begins tomorrow morning." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Dr. Reed arranged for Amara to have a proper tournament uniform, a simple but well-tailored black skirt and white blouse that fit her perfectly. "Presentation matters," the older woman explained as Amara examined herself in a mirror for the first time in months. Not because it should, but because it does. While Amara practiced chess scenarios, Dr. Reed and Marcus worked behind the scenes, countering Prescott's attempts to disadvantage her. When he assigned her to a table directly beneath an air conditioning vent, Dr. Reed pulled strings to have the entire HVAC system coincidentally scheduled for maintenance that day. When he attempted to change her matches to the earliest morning slots, hoping the hospital visiting hours would conflict, Marcus arranged for a volunteer to sit with Vivian. By the time the tournament's opening ceremony began, the Westmore Chess Club had become a battleground of whispers and sidelong glances. Amara's entry had created a sensation that extended beyond the club's walls, with local chess enthusiasts turning up in unprecedented numbers to witness the homeless prodigy competing against the establishment. Prescott, standing at the podium to deliver the opening remarks, could barely conceal his displeasure at the crowd, which included more diversity than the club had seen in its entire history. "Welcome to the 68th Annual Westmore Winter Championship," he began, his voice tight with forced pleasantry. "We are delighted to host 32 of the region's finest chess players for this prestigious event." His emphasis on finest carried a clear subtext, as his gaze briefly flickered to where Amara sat quietly in the back row. The tournament format was straightforward: 5 rounds of Swiss system matches over 3 days, with the top 4 players advancing to a final knockout stage. As the lowest-rated entrant having been arbitrarily assigned, the minimum possible rating since she had no official record, Amara would face one of the top seeds in the first round, Jonathan Miller, her first opponent from the club, who had demanded a rematch to restore his reputation. The pairings were clearly manipulated, but Amara accepted the challenge without complaint. As the players took their positions at the designated tables, the stark contrasts became impossible to ignore. Every other competitor was at least twice Amara's age, predominantly male and exclusively white. The whispers that followed her as she made her way to her assigned table, a wobbly setup in the far corner with poor lighting, carried equal parts curiosity, disdain, and in some cases outright hostility. Miller was already seated, his expression a mask of determined concentration. "I hope you don't expect another fluke," he said under his breath as she sat down. "I've studied your game. You won't surprise me twice." Amara didn't respond. focusing instead on centering herself as her father had taught her. Chess isn't just played with your mind, he'd told her once. It's played with your spirit. If you're angry, afraid, or distracted, you've lost before you've begun. The first match began with Miller playing far more cautiously than in their previous encounter. Gone was the dismissive arrogance replaced by intense focus and respect for her capabilities. The game evolved into a complex middle-game struggle, with both players demonstrating high-level strategic thinking. But where Miller played textbook chess, solid, predictable by the numbers, Amara brought creativity and intuition to the board, finding unconventional solutions to tactical problems. After 3 hours of intense play, Amara emerged victorious again, though by a narrower margin than before. The victory sent ripples through the tournament hall. Other matches paused momentarily as players glanced over to confirm what they were hearing. The unknown girl had defeated a tournament favorite in the first round. Miller, to his credit, accepted the loss with more grace than before, extending his hand in a proper concession. "You're the real deal," he admitted quietly. "Whatever happens next, don't let them take that away from you." His unexpected sportsmanship caught Amara off guard, suggesting that perhaps not everyone in the club shared Prescott's prejudices. The subsequent rounds presented new challenges, each opponent bringing different strengths and styles to the board. Amara faced a defensive specialist who tried to grind her down in a 7-hour endgame, a tactical genius who created dazzling combinations that tested the limits of her calculation abilities. An elderly theoretician who played openings so obscure they weren't covered in any of the books she'd studied. Through each match, she adapted and evolved, drawing on her natural talent and the unconventional chess education she'd cobbled together from library books, park hustlers, and games observed through the Westmore's windows. By the end of the second day, Amara had won 3 matches and drawn 1, placing her in contention for the semifinal spots. The tournament had taken on a David versus Goliath narrative in the local chess community, with a small but vocal crowd of supporters gathering to watch her games. Among them was Detective Wilson, who observed her matches with quiet intensity during his off-duty hours. After her 4th-round draw, he approached her during the break. "Your father would be proud," he said simply before adding in a lower voice. "I've found something in his case files. A surveillance tape from a gas station 3 blocks from the robbery. The timestamp matches his alibi, but it was never entered into evidence." The implications of this statement hit Amara like a physical blow. "You mean Wilson held up a cautionary hand?" "I mean, I'm looking into it. Nothing more yet. Stay focused on your tournament." As he walked away, Amara felt the weight of dual responsibilities: to win the tournament that could secure her immediate future, and to pursue the truth that might free her father. The physical toll of the tournament, combined with her vigil at her grandmother's bedside and the emotional strain of recent events, began to catch up with Amara as the third day dawned. Dark circles shadowed her eyes and her hands trembled slightly as she set up her pieces for the crucial 5th round. Her opponent, a college professor with a reputation for psychological warfare, noticed her fatigue immediately. "Rough night?" he asked with false sympathy. "Perhaps this is becoming too much for you." "No shame in withdrawing, you know." Amara said nothing, but inside doubt began to creep in. The exhaustion was making it difficult to calculate variations to see the board clearly. Midway through the game, she found herself in a precarious position, her king under attack and her defenses crumbling. As she struggled to find a saving move, the faces of her supporters in the small crowd, Dr. Reed, Marcus, even Detective Wilson, blurred before her eyes. The room seemed to tilt the chess pieces swimming in her vision. With a soft gasp that she tried to disguise as a cough, Amara felt herself sliding sideways, darkness encroaching at the edges of her consciousness. The last thing she remembered before collapsing was the startled expression of her opponent and the sound of Dr. Reed's voice calling her name. The stark white ceiling of the tournament hall's first aid room slowly came into focus as Amara regained consciousness. Dr. Reed's concerned face hovered above her professional medical assessment, overriding her role as chess sponsor. Dehydration and exhaustion, she diagnosed, pressing a cool cloth to Amara's forehead. "Your body is telling you something, my dear. Listen to it." Nearby, Marcus paced anxiously relief, washing over his features as Amara's eyes opened. "You had us worried there for a minute. How are you feeling?" Amara tried to sit up, panic suddenly gripping her. "The game, my match." Dr. Reed gently pressed her back down. "Rest. The tournament director has called a temporary adjournment of your match due to medical emergency. It's within the rules." The door opened abruptly, and Richard Prescott entered, his expression a careful mask of official concern that did nothing to hide the satisfaction in his eyes. "I've consulted with the Rules Committee," he announced without preamble. "Player withdrawal due to health concerns results in an automatic forfeit. I'm afraid Miss Johnson's tournament run has come to an end." Dr. Reed rose to her full height, impressive despite her advanced age. "Absolutely not, Richard. The FIDE regulations clearly state that medical emergencies warrant reasonable accommodation, including rescheduling within the same tournament day." Prescott's smile tightened. "The Westmore Club operates under its own bylaws, Eleanor. You know this." The standoff between the two threatened to escalate until a new voice joined the conversation. "Actually, sir, the tournament registration materials specifically reference FIDE regulations for situations not explicitly covered in club bylaws." Marcus held up a dog-eared tournament brochure. "I checked. Medical emergencies fall under FIDE jurisdiction by your own documentation." Prescott's face reddened, but he found himself cornered by the club's own paperwork. "Fine," he snapped. "The match will resume in 1 hour. If she cannot continue at that time, the forfeit stands." After he stormed out, Amara struggled again to sit up, this time successfully. "I need to finish the match," she insisted, though her voice was weaker than she would have liked. "I can't lose now." "Not when we're so close." Dr. Reed studied her with clinical precision. "You need fluids, food, and rest. In that order. Marcus, find her something with electrolytes and protein. I'll speak with the tournament arbiter about extending the resumption time as much as possible." As they fussed over her, Amara's mind raced. Even if she recovered enough to finish this match, the semifinals would begin the same day. In her current state, her chances of advancing further seemed increasingly slim. The door opened again, this time admitting Detective Wilson. "Heard what happened," he said, his usual gruff demeanor softened with concern. "Brought you this." He held out a paper cup containing what looked like a sports drink. "My daughter's a track athlete. Swears by this stuff for quick recovery." As Amara sipped the drink gratefully, Wilson lowered his voice. "There's something else you should know. I've been doing some digging into Prescott's past. Turns out he was a character witness in your father's trial. For the prosecution." The revelation hit Amara like a thunderbolt. "What? But he acted like he barely recognized our name when we first met." Wilson nodded grimly. "Exactly. And get this. The robbery your father was convicted of. The victim was Prescott's brother-in-law. The pieces suddenly clicked into place with the same clarity as a chess combination. So this was never just about me being in his club. It was personal from the moment he heard my name." "Seems that way," Wilson confirmed. "Prescott was convinced your father was guilty, testified to his dangerous character, despite minimal prior interaction. It's all in the transcripts. This new information cast everything in a different light." Prescott's opposition wasn't merely racial prejudice or elitism, though those elements were certainly present, but a vendetta connected to her father's case. A case that, according to Wilson's earlier comments, was built on shaky evidence at best. "I need to win this tournament," Amara said with newfound determination. "Not just for the money now, I need to beat him at his own game." Wilson's expression turned cautious. "Focus on recovering first, one match at a time." With Marcus and Dr. Reed's care, plus the detective's sports drink, Amara gradually regained her strength. When the tournament arbiter arrived to check on her condition, she was able to stand without assistance and demonstrate sufficient recovery to continue play. Her fifth-round opponent, perhaps moved by the drama unfolding or simply unwilling to win by forfeit, agreed to a draw upon resumption. A generous offer that guaranteed Amara's advancement to the semifinals based on her previous results. The semifinal pairings were announced late that afternoon, with Amara scheduled to face the tournament's second seed, a former state champion known for his aggressive attacking style. But a last-minute change appeared on the official bracket, sending a murmur through the gathered spectators. Richard Prescott himself had entered the semi-final bracket, replacing the original contender who had mysteriously withdrawn. Family emergency Prescott explained smoothly when questioned about the substitution. As club president and a qualified alternate with equal points, I've stepped in to maintain the integrity of the bracket. The manipulation was transparent to everyone, but technically within the rules. Prescott had engineered a direct confrontation, placing himself as the final obstacle between Amara and the championship match. As Amara prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most challenging game of her young life, media attention around the tournament intensified. A local newspaper reporter had picked up the story of the homeless chess prodigy battling against the elite club, and photographers circulated through the tournament hall, capturing the David versus Goliath narrative. Prescott clearly hadn't anticipated this level of public scrutiny. His usual tactics of quiet obstruction now exposed to journalistic observation. When the semi-final round began, the club was more crowded than it had been in decades. Chess enthusiasts from across the city had gathered to witness the showdown, many openly cheering for Amara, despite the Westmore's usual decorum. Prescott sat across from her, his expensive suit and confident demeanor contrasting sharply with Amara's borrowed tournament clothes and visible exhaustion. "Quite the audience you've attracted," he commented, as they set up their pieces. Enjoying your 15 minutes of fame, Amara didn't respond, focusing instead on the board between them. As white, she had the first move, the small advantage that might make all the difference in a match of this caliber. Her opening move, pushing her queen's pawn forward 2 squares, was met with a nod of recognition from Prescott, the Queen's Gambit, a classic choice. The early game proceeded with both players developing their pieces methodically, neither willing to take unnecessary risks. Prescott played with the confidence of someone with decades of tournament experience, his moves coming quickly and decisively. But beneath his assurance, Amara sensed something more, a personal animosity that occasionally manifested in subtle psychological tactics. "Your father favored this opening as well," he remarked casually after her bishop development, before his career change. The deliberate reference to her father's imprisonment was clearly meant to unsettle her, and Amara felt a momentary spike of anger that threatened her concentration. But she recalled her father's words about emotional control and channeled the feeling into heightened focus instead. The middle game evolved into a complex positional struggle, with Prescott demonstrating why he had been a formidable player in his prime. His strategic understanding was profound, each move serving multiple purposes on the board. Amara found herself working harder than in any previous match, calculating variations deeply to avoid the subtle traps he laid. An hour into the game, Detective Wilson entered the tournament hall, catching Amara's eye briefly before taking a seat at the back. Something about his expression, a contained excitement beneath his professional demeanor, caused a flutter of hope in her chest, but she forced her attention back to the board. The critical moment came after 37 moves, with material roughly equal but Prescott holding a slight positional advantage. As Amara contemplated her options, her opponent leaned forward slightly. "I've been curious," he said quietly for her ears alone. "Did Calvin teach you his special endgame technique? The one where he pretends to accept responsibility, then changes his story when it's convenient." The reference to her father's consistent claims of innocence, framed as manipulative dishonesty, struck deeper than any previous jab. Amara's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her knight, the piece hovering uncertainly over the board as her mind raced with both chess calculations and emotional turbulence. It was at this precise moment that the tournament hall door opened again, and a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Detective Wilson stood with another police officer, accompanied by a court official who carried a sealed envelope. Though Amara couldn't hear their conversation with the tournament director, the serious expressions and official demeanor suggested something significant was unfolding. The distraction gave Amara a moment to collect herself, to remember why she was here and what was truly at stake. When she returned her focus to the board, a clarity descended that she hadn't experienced before, a perfect synthesis of emotional purpose and logical calculation. With decisive confidence, She moved her knight to an unexpected square, initiating a complex tactical sequence that would require perfect execution over the next 7 moves. Prescott's eyebrows rose slightly, the first indication that she had surprised him. He studied the new position with increasing concern, the comfortable advantage he'd been nursing suddenly under threat. As the sequence unfolded, spectators who understood high-level chess began to murmur in appreciation. What had appeared to be a slight disadvantage for Amara was transforming through a series of precisely calculated exchanges into a winning position. Prescott's confident expression gradually gave way to disbelief as he recognized the trap closing around him. His king, once safely protected behind a phalanx of pawns, now faced a coordinated attack from Amara's rook, bishop, and queen. With each move, his options dwindled. In desperation, he attempted to create counterplay on the opposite wing. But Amara had calculated these possibilities as well, neutralizing his threats while advancing her own attack. After 53 moves, the position became untenable. Prescott's king stood exposed with checkmate inevitable within 3 moves. The traditional etiquette would be to resign, sparing himself the final humiliation of being checkmated on the board. For a moment, it seemed he might do exactly that, his hand moving toward his king to tip it over in concession. But at the last second, a commotion from the back of the hall disrupted the moment. Detective Wilson was approaching their table court documents in hand and a determined expression on his face. Prescott's eyes widened in alarm, his attention dividing between the losing position on the board and the approaching detective. With a sudden violent motion, he swept his arm across the table, sending chess pieces flying in all directions. "This is absurd," he shouted, standing so abruptly that his chair toppled backward. "I refuse to continue this farce." The tournament hall fell silent, shocked by the outburst from the usually composed club president. The tournament arbiter rushed forward, his expression thunderous. "Mr. Prescott, such conduct is completely unacceptable." Prescott's face had turned a dangerous shade of red, his composure entirely evaporated. "This entire tournament has been compromised. The girls' participation was irregular from the start." Even as he ranted, tournament officials were documenting the board position before the disruption, with several chess experts confirming that Amara's victory had been all but secured. Detective Wilson reached the table, seemingly unperturbed by Prescott's outburst. "Richard Prescott," he said formally, "I need to speak with you regarding new evidence in the Calvin Johnson case." The mention of her father's name silenced Prescott immediately, his face draining of color as quickly as it had flushed. "This isn't the time or place," he began, but Wilson continued steadily. "The court has issued an order to reopen the case based on suppressed exculpatory evidence. Evidence that several parties, including yourself, may have been aware of during the original trial. The implications hung in the air heavier than the chess pieces now scattered across the floor." As Prescott was escorted from the tournament hall by Wilson and the other officer, the arbiter officially recorded the match result victory to Amara Johnson by forfeit due to opponent misconduct, advancing her to the championship final. But as the reality of reaching the final match began to sink in, Amara found herself more focused on Wilson's words than on her tournament success. New evidence, her father's case reopened. And somehow Prescott was involved in both stories, her present struggle and her father's past injustice, creating a web of connection she was only beginning to understand. With the semifinal drama concluded, Amara had a brief respite before the championship match. As she sat in the club's lounge area trying to process everything that had happened, Dr. Reed joined her with a cup of tea and a serious expression. "There's something you should know before the final," she said gently. "I've just learned that Richard Prescott has been more than just an obstacle to your participation. He's been actively working to discredit you and your father for years." She paused, weighing her next words carefully. "The question is, do you want to know the full story now, or would it be better to focus on your championship match first?" The championship hall of the Westmore Chess Club gleamed under crystal chandeliers, every seat filled with spectators, eager to witness the conclusion of what had become the most dramatic tournament in the club's 68-year history. Amara sat at the center table, her posture straight. Despite the emotional and physical exhaustion of recent days, her eyes focused on the pristine chessboard before her. The final match would pit her against Grandmaster Leonard Hoffman, a 70-year-old veteran of international competition who had emerged victorious from the other semi-final bracket. Unlike many, at the Westmore, Hoffman had welcomed Amara's presence in the tournament, publicly praising her talent and stating that chess should be a meritocracy of the mind, not of circumstance. His sportsmanship had earned him respect from both sides of the club's increasingly visible divide. Before the championship match began, Dr. Reed had shared with Amara what she'd learned about the connection between Prescott and her father. The story was more complex and disturbing than Amara could have imagined. 4 years ago, Calvin Johnson had been building a reputation as a promising chess player in Boston's black community, organizing tournaments in underserved neighborhoods and advocating for greater diversity in the city's chess establishments. His efforts had brought him into conflict with Richard Prescott, who viewed such initiatives as diluting the prestige of traditional chess venues like the Westmore. When Prescott's brother-in-law, Alexander Bennett, reported a break-in and robbery at his Beacon Hill home, Prescott had immediately suspected Calvin despite a complete lack of prior criminal history. The chess connection. Several valuable antique chess sets had been among the stolen items, had provided circumstantial evidence that, combined with a questionable eyewitness identification, led to Calvin's conviction. What Detective Wilson had discovered, however, changed everything. Security footage from a gas station placed Calvin exactly where he'd claimed to be during the robbery, at a community chess tournament across town. This exculpatory evidence had been logged by the investigating officers, but mysteriously never presented at trial. Furthermore, telephone records showed calls between Prescott and the lead detective during the critical period of the investigation, suggesting potential interference in the case. As the championship match began, Amara carried this knowledge with her, the personal stakes extending far beyond the $50,000 prize. Her victory would not only secure her immediate future, but serve as vindication against the man who had orchestrated her father's wrongful imprisonment. Hoffman, playing white, opened with the English opening, a flexible first move that would allow him to adapt his strategy based on Amara's response. She replied with a solid, symmetric defense, prioritizing piece development over aggressive advancement. The early game proceeded methodically, with both players demonstrating textbook precision. But as the middle game approached, Amara began introducing creative complications, steering the position away from well-established theory into uncharted territory where her intuitive talent could shine. Hoffman, despite his decades of experience, found himself spending increasing amounts of time on each move, the unfamiliar positions requiring careful calculation rather than reliance on memorized patterns. 2 hours into the match, a palpable tension filled the tournament hall. Chess enthusiasts in the audience recognized they were witnessing something extraordinary. A 12-year-old girl with no formal training, creating positions that challenged a grandmaster's understanding of the game. Even club members who had initially resented Amara's presence watched with reluctant admiration. Midway through the third hour, as Amara contemplated a critical decision, a commotion at the entrance briefly disrupted the focused silence. Detective Wilson had returned, this time accompanied by a tall black man in prison-issued clothing, flanked by corrections officers. Calvin Johnson, temporarily released for a hearing related to his case, stood at the back of the tournament hall, his eyes finding his daughter across the crowded room. The recognition and love that passed between them in that silent moment gave Amara a surge of emotional strength. Her father, thinner than she remembered his face lined with the hardships of prison life, gave her a small nod of encouragement before being escorted to a seat by the officers. With renewed focus, Amara returned her attention to the board, selecting a move that initiated a daring queenside attack. Hoffman responded with a defensive maneuver that revealed he had anticipated her strategy, leading to a complex series of exchanges that left both sides with approximately equal material, but Amara with slightly better piece. Coordination. As they entered the endgame, the subtle advantages began to magnify. Amara's rooks controlled open files, her remaining bishop commanded long diagonals, and her passed pawn threatened promotion. Hoffman, recognizing the deteriorating position, initiated a desperate counterattack, sacrificing his bishop for 2 pawns in an attempt to create connected passers on the king's side. For several moves, the outcome hung in the balance, with audience members holding their breath as the players navigated the razor's edge between victory and defeat. Finally, after a sequence of precise defensive moves, Amara neutralized Hoffman's counterplay and consolidated her advantage. The Grandmaster studied the position for a full 7 minutes before extending his hand across the board in resignation, a gesture of respect that acknowledged both her victory and her legitimacy as a chess player of exceptional talent. "Beautifully played," he said sincerely as applause erupted around them. "Truly beautiful chess." The tournament director approached with the championship trophy and the envelope containing the prize check, both seeming almost comically large in Amara's small hands as she accepted them. Cameras flashed as local media captured the moment. The homeless girl who had defied all odds to win the most prestigious chess tournament in New England. As the formal ceremony concluded, Detective Wilson approached the stage, requesting a moment to address the gathered crowd. With the tournament director's permission, he stepped forward, official documents in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying across the now silent hall. "Today we've witnessed an extraordinary demonstration of chess excellence. But there's another matter of justice that requires attention." He gestured for Calvin to join him at the front. 4 years ago, Calvin Johnson was wrongfully convicted of a crime he did not commit. Evidence that would have exonerated him was suppressed during his trial. Gasps and murmurs spread through the audience as Wilson continued. Today, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office has filed a motion to vacate Mr. Johnson's conviction based on newly discovered evidence and potential prosecutorial misconduct. Calvin stood tall despite his prison clothes' dignity, evident in every line of his posture. Furthermore, Wilson added an investigation has been opened into Richard Prescott's role in potentially influencing witness testimony and suppressing exculpatory evidence in that case. The revelation sent shockwaves through the club membership. Many turned to stare at Dr. Reed, who nodded grimly in confirmation. "I discovered financial transactions between Prescott and the detective who led the investigation," she explained to those nearest her. When confronted, the detective admitted to withholding the gas station footage at Prescott's request. In the chaos that followed, with reporters shouting questions and club members arguing amongst themselves, Amara found her way to her father's side. Despite the watchful eyes of the corrections officers, they embraced for the first time in 4 years, the chess trophy pressed awkwardly between them. "I knew you'd keep playing," Calvin whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, Amara." The weeks that followed brought transformation on every front. The prize money allowed Amara to secure proper medical care for her grandmother, who recovered steadily in a private room at Boston General. Dr. Reed, true to her word, provided temporary housing for both Amara and Vivian, while more permanent arrangements were made. Calvin's case moved swiftly through the judicial system, the overwhelming evidence of his innocence and the impropriety surrounding his conviction, creating pressure for expedited review. Richard Prescott, faced with potential criminal charges related to evidence tampering and witness intimidation, resigned his position at the Westmore Chess Club and retreated from public life, his reputation in tatters. The media narrative evolved from the initial chess prodigy angle to a more complex examination of systemic injustice, with several prominent publications using Amara and Calvin's story to highlight broader issues of racial bias in the Amara and Calvin story, criminal justice system, and exclusionary practices in traditional institutions. Perhaps most significantly, the Westmore itself underwent a profound transformation. With Prescott gone, a new leadership committee was formed with Dr. Reed serving as interim president. Their first official act was to establish a community outreach program that would bring chess education to underserved neighborhoods throughout Boston, with Calvin Johnson, his conviction now vacated, hired as the program's director upon his release. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Amara stood in the main hall of the Westmore Chess Club, watching as children from diverse backgrounds filled the previously exclusive space. The Westmore Chess Academy for Exceptional Youth had officially opened its doors with Amara herself, serving as a student instructor for beginners. The membership policies had been completely rewritten, with talent and interest in chess the only criteria for acceptance. Dr. Reed, observing from nearby, smiled at the transformation. "Your father said chess is the one place where everyone starts equal," she remarked to Amara. "We're finally making that true here as well." Calvin, now fully exonerated and compensated for his wrongful imprisonment, had used part of the settlement to establish a foundation providing legal assistance to others fighting similar injustices. The remainder had secured a comfortable apartment for the Johnson family, with Vivian occupying the sunny master bedroom where she continued her recovery. As Amara guided a young black girl through the basics of knight movement, she caught sight of Marcus entering the room. He had been promoted to program coordinator for the club's community initiatives, his knowledge of both chess and the neighborhoods they hoped to reach, making him invaluable to the new mission. "Special delivery," he announced, holding up a large envelope bearing the seal of Harvard University. "Scholarship Committee was very impressed by your application." Amara accepted the envelope with trembling hands, hardly daring to believe that the educational opportunities once thought impossible were now within reach. Her journey from homeless chess player to scholarship recipient and community leader had unfolded with the same unexpected brilliance as her best chess combinations. As the afternoon session concluded, Amara found herself standing before the club's trophy case. Her championship cup now occupied the central position, but it was the photograph beside it that held her attention, her father and grandmother flanking her as she held the oversized winner's check, their faces alight with pride and possibility. A chessboard sat nearby, the pieces arranged in the final position of her championship match against Hoffman. The winning sequence, labeled the Johnson variation, had already been published in chess journals and was being studied by players around the world. From a game played for survival, literally asking to play for food, had emerged not only personal redemption but institutional change. As new students filed in for the advanced class she would be teaching alongside her father Amara, felt a profound sense of having come full circle. The Westmore Club, once a symbol of exclusion, had been transformed into a gateway of opportunity, and chess, the game that had been her escape during the darkest moments on the streets, had become the vehicle for creating a brighter future. Not just for herself, but for countless others who would follow the path she had fought so hard to. Open. What do you think about Amara's incredible journey from playing chess for food to changing an entire institution? Has her story inspired you to believe in the power of talent to overcome prejudice and systemic barriers? If you found this story of perseverance and justice moving, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge us to create a more equitable world. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes, against all odds, justice does prevail. Thank you for joining us on Amara's journey from the streets to chess mastery, proving that sometimes the most powerful moves happen both on and off the board. Amara's journey teaches us that talent knows no socioeconomic boundaries. When given opportunity, even those society has marginalized can achieve greatness. Her story shows how systemic racism and prejudice create artificial barriers, preventing brilliant minds from reaching their potential. Yet it also demonstrates how courage, persistence, and raw ability can overcome these obstacles. The story reveals how institutions maintain exclusivity, not through stated rules, but through unwritten codes and practices that perpetuate discrimination. The Westmore Club's resistance wasn't about chess skill, but about protecting privilege and maintaining racial hierarchies. True merit-based systems threaten those who benefit from inequity. We learned that allies are essential for challenging unjust systems. Dr. Reed, Marcus, Detective Wilson, each used their position to help dismantle barriers. Their actions remind us that privilege can become a tool for creating change when wielded consciously. Perhaps most importantly, Amara's story teaches us that transformation is possible. Individuals can grow beyond prejudice. Institutions can evolve beyond discriminatory practices. Systems can be reformed. But this change requires both external pressure and internal champions willing to challenge the status quo. The greatest lesson is that justice, like chess, requires strategic thinking, sacrifice, and perseverance. Victory isn't guaranteed, but with skill, determination, and allies in the right positions, even the most entrenched opponents can ultimately be checkmated. Has a story like Amara's touched your heart? Have you witnessed talent being overlooked because of prejudice or social status? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you've ever been underestimated or faced discrimination, how did you overcome it? If you've been in a position to help someone break through barriers, what motivated you to act? Like this video if you believe in creating more opportunities for underprivileged youth with exceptional abilities. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge unjust systems and celebrate resilience in the face of adversity. And please share this video with someone who might need inspiration today. A child facing obstacles, a teacher working with disadvantaged students, or anyone fighting for equality in their community. Together we can create a world where talent is recognized regardless of race or background. Thank you for joining us on Amara's journey. Remember that in life, as in chess, sometimes the most powerful moves happen when we're brave enough to challenge the rules of the game.